Thanks for staying with us. In the laws that set up, that part of the laws that govern us says that every telephone subscription has to be registered to the subscriber. Why? For security reasons. Now, so it's not also surprising when the federal government said that all SIMs needed to be registered. Every SIM that is in use in Nigeria ought to be registered, and of course, all of that panic that went on late last year, early this year, to ensure that all Nigerians register. That's not really a new policy because it's something that the government had been talking about for years. Well, anyway, all that happened, and this is where we are now. But what is shocking is that even though we have about 6 million SIMs linked to their national identity numbers, the challenge on our hands is how effective has that exercise been for the purpose of security, or for security reasons, as we say. Well, that's part of the conversations we're having this morning, and Alfred Okudili joins us this morning. He is a forensic security consultant. He joins us virtually. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. And first of all, would you say that we have made any significant movement forward in the objectives of the SIM NIN linkage in our country?
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me on. In fairness, I would rather want to respond this way. We have a population of over 200 million, and we're talking about 6 million upgraded national identity platform. Of course, when you compare that to the population, it's nothing. However, I know that the relevant agencies, security agencies, have been frankly putting in a lot to ensure that we secure our state and have a more stable security situation in the country. I don't think we have done too well, but I think there is a starting point, and probably that's exactly where we are now.
Well, one would have expected that it's something that should have been built into the DNA of the system, so to speak. I mean, we started having talks about all this GSM in mobile telephony in Nigeria for many years, even before GSM came. You would remember the 090 platform that was, that came well before the GSM of 2001. So I'm wondering, that's something that should have been built into the system. You do not even get the SIM without it being registered. At what point did we drop the ball, and what's the assurance that we're not going to do it again?
Well, I think it has to do with awareness.
Awareness on whose part? Awareness on whose part? On that of the telecom operators or the people?
No, awareness on the policy makers in Nigeria, because without adequate policy, I think some of these projects will suffer a lot of setbacks. And you have to bear in mind that in making policies, there are lots of factors that comes to play, most of which is political. The political class is sharply divided. And of course, there are also certain influences on the political class, majorly ethnocentric and, of course, religious influences. So when you bring this to the board, you find a conflict that has hindered us from making holistic policies that serves the good and benefit of the entire nation. So that seems to be, I don't know if we're coming out of that, but it has hampered the perception capacities of our political leaders. So the policy makers drive this project. And if they are not well equipped, if they are not well informed, and if they don't have a visionary outlook to particularly security issues, it will be long in coming it will remain a challenge to the system because we've had the police before the independence of Nigeria. I wouldn't blame the colonial officers because that was not their priority. They wanted their own security while they explored the surroundings or the environment. But from independence, I guess we came into independence grappling with a lot of ethnic issues, and we didn't have the opportunity to develop our capacity to engage at the level that would have prepared us to be in a better position by now when it comes to um, building a central database that could serve security purposes and, of course, other national interests.
It's quite surprising that issues around capacity and ethnicity and, how the political class is structured, even has an effect on a policy that looks pretty simple and straightforward in the face. We've heard of this NIN Sim registration way before now, as my colleague did point out, that there had been steps in the past to ensure that people's SIMs were linked to their national identity numbers. But it's only in recent times that we have seen an aggressive push. In fact, an initial deadline was set, and there was a lot of uproar as to how the process was going, especially coming in the light of COVID-19. And, it was seen that government did listen, and they kept on pushing the deadline. The deadline has been pushed even once again, but so far we understand that about 60 million Nigerians have been registered on this NIN SIM linkage, or SIM NIN linkage, if you like. The question now is, how are they harmonizing the data? Because there are fears that the telecom companies are just the ones doing the registration. They will take your number and take your NIN, and you have it somewhere in the database of the telecoms company. But NIMC is supposed to take all of this data and synchronize. The question is, I do not know how much faith you have that NIMC itself has the capacity to be able to do that. I mean, if we're looking at 60 million Nigerians already being registered, what are your thoughts from what you know of the sector?
Well, I think they are capable of doing what they've been set up to do. The question is, do they have the know-how and also the resources? It's one thing. We're all Nigerians. We know sometimes things don't work as fast as we intended them in our society. The National Identity Management Commission, of course, I believe they have competent hands. They have the capacity to deliver on this project. But when you talk of capacity, you can't use the paucity of funds. If they don't have the funds, they could have the best ideas, but there will be little they can do without resources. So I would think that if they have been well funded, have not consulted with the operators of the sector, but if they were well funded, I do not think that we'll be talking about this now. For the telecom companies, they are under pressure because they would want to be seen not to compromise the already worsening threat across the country. And one major, traffic through which our information travels, whether they are crime or non-crime related, is the telephone. People, for instance, kidnappers cannot have a successful outing without telephone contact. They can't send human beings to go and negotiate for ransom. So they needed that platform. So if we have the resources and the know-how, I think the national identity management could have done better. For the telecom companies, of course, criminals ride on their network to deliver their demands and, of course, control their interests. So I will see the pressure on them, and I'm sure they are spending a lot to get it done. Sadly enough, the political class haven't given it any push because probably because a lot of them have policemen guarding them, paid for by public funds. So they don't it doesn't come to them at any cost. They don't feel as much threat as most Nigerians. So this will be a factor. Other than that, I don't see
How
why
vi
we should be talking about. Yes, go on.
How vital is it for a country to have a central database? Because at the end of the day, I think that's what a lot of Nigerians are hoping that the exercise was going to provide. A situation whereby people will not have to, thumbprint at NIMSI. When they want driver's license, they go to thumbprint. When they want passport, they go to thumbprint. They want to believe that wherever it is that, if you have registered in a place, say for instance, at NIMSI, whenever it is you go to get a national passport, for instance, if your information is called up, that information should be the same and perhaps should be able to serve the purposes that, say, the passport office will need it for, immigration might need it for. How vital is it? You say that the authorities haven't really pushed. Some might disagree with you. How would you qualify this push for this NIN Sim registration?
It, I mean, you cannot have security without information. Um, Security agents are not ancestral skills. They need contact. In our circle, we say that you cannot have a contact without a trace, and that's where they are. The identity numbers or the identification numbers of the population is critical to the security planning in any country. And I don't think it's exclusive to Nigeria. We have about 46 African countries that have made the national identity project compulsory for their citizens, at least for those, from the age of 16. In fact, in some countries, you have 2 months after you turn 16 to ensure you have your national identity on you. It's sad that I think when it comes back home, we have this tendency to politicize everything, and that's why I said our problem comes from, with due respect, the political class because their priorities doesn't seem to tally with our national needs. When it comes to political interest, they discuss voting, winning elections. But for people to vote, if you want credible elections, you need credible identity. You need credible process that will ensure that the best candidate emerge. But that is not
Are
our
you saying
priority.
that
You find,
are you, if I get you right, you're insinuating that this process has already been politicized? The question I'll ask is how?
it is. It is because an average Nigerian does not understand that their security is private. So you find that people are complaining even across the country. In some areas, the registration is so difficult. People gave up after going to the NIMC offices, and they waited for days. Some people starved, queued for hours, and no policy statement, no government came for to aggressively address the challenges that those responsible for the registration were going through. So you find also that when we are doing elections, because people hope to rig, they don't want credible elections. So the cards will expose individuals. If you come to a polling unit and you want to vote, and your information is captured in the central data system, and the agency conducting the election also have access to this information, they find out that it will be difficult for you to cheat because if you vote at one unit, you will not be capable of voting at another unit. So if we stop this project from having effective function, the people who gain are those that see gain, political gain out of the kiosk. So that's why we're having this issue. That's on one part. There's also the
I find
ethnic
that a
dimension
little.
to it.
Sorry to
Okay.
interrupt you because we're about to make
There
a
is the
second part. 'Cause I was about to interrogate the first part of your submission, but let's quickly take the second
well,
part of your submission.
now there is the ethnic dimension. Um, but before I touch the ethnic dimension, let me touch the awareness. Most Nigerians are not really aware of the necessity for their having these documents. And because also the preparation and provisions to make it a successful exercise was not adequately put in place. Nigerians felt if it's important to the government, they should organize it better. So a lot of people lost interest. And now to the ethnic thing, people in some areas, because of their level of education and awareness, do not attach any importance to the national identity program because they feel they're in the farm, they're in their communities, they've never left their communities. The only time they see activities around them are during the campaign, political campaign period. So they really don't have any contact, any relationship with the structures of governance, apart from when certain demands are required of them. So there's a disconnect. Until we address those challenges, the project will be struggling to take off as effectively as it should.
Well, I have heard of, excuse me, I've heard of political, I mean, there have been questions as to how, for instance, Nigerians who hope to get NINs, I mean, to get their national identity numbers, how those people are confirmed as Nigerians, especially since we have been able to confirm that we do have incursions from neighboring countries, people who might have some affinity with certain ethnic groups in our country, you know, who are able to make their way in here. And we have no way to seem of really knowing who is a Nigerian, whose roots are originally in Nigeria. And this is a problem we have with most border communities. So yes, that is a problem I have heard so far in terms of knowing who a true Nigerian is. I don't forget that even the case of the vice president, former vice president, is currently being challenged in court over whether or not he was a Nigerian as at the time he was even vice president of this country. So those kinds of challenges exist. That is on the one hand. But in terms of this NIN Sim registration, I mean, the penalties are obvious. If you're not able to register, link your NIN with your SIM, at some point they believe that you'll be cut off. So there is some incentive for Nigerians to want to do this NIN Sim linkage. And INEC has already said that they would not need NIN for you to do your voter registration. So a registration which is currently ongoing. So for some people, there might be some misunderstanding or disagreement, it will seem, when you say that, oh, there could be some political calculations into this, because the NIN Sim registration is not needed for voter registration. So how is this affecting politics, so to speak?
Okay. First of all, voting in a country is meant for the citizens of that country, and they are supposed to have been captured in the database of that country. So the system knows if you're of age, because at birth you are supposed to have your national identity. And that's how it's done in some countries. I don't usually like using the United States of America and Europe as the example, but even here in Africa, in South Africa and in some other parts, Botswana, and some other countries across Africa, it is very crucial that a child is given his national identification from birth. That's why we have registration of birth, and also we also have registration of death. So if people do not have their identity from their local point of entry into the world, which is their birth, my sister, it's going to be difficult for them to understand the weight. Now, how does that affect us? When we go to the pools, they bring figures, they bring registered documents, and they tell you that this population is registered to this polling unit. Last local government election, I was in the polling unit where they had about 3,000 registered voters. not up to 100 people showed up. Now you'll be wondering how 3,000 people could have come to register at that unit, and on an election day they are not showing up because they don't feel connected to the activity. Probably they did it because if you don't have a voter's card, you might not be able to enjoy certain benefits or be allowed access by the state government or the local government to enjoy some things. So people look at what they tend to gain. Now, we don't have a patriotic perspective to this entire exercise. Voters, your NIN card, your NIN is supposed to give you a unique identification that helps you to engage not only in political activities, commercial, academic, and also other demands of the society. It helps the society to capture their population. It also helps the authorities, particularly to monitor the activities of citizens. So when we have a peculiar or unique identity card on us, the system knows that you have moved from point A to point B. The system also can trace activities related to your life. Whether you're sick or you're healthy,
You're
the system
raising.
will find that because
Yes, that's for the elections. But can you speak to the substantive issue of the relevance of this NIN Sim registration to security? There are reports awash, all over the place that people, bandits, kidnappers will call victims, relatives, and dependents, and just in order for them to say, okay, this is where you bring the ransom to and everything. There are reports that on some occasions, these victims' relatives give the phone numbers to security agencies for the purpose of tracking that number, hopefully, and being able to know the location of the bandits and all of that, or who even owns that SIM. That hasn't been happening. I mean, or so it would seem. So that's why a number of people are asking, is this NIN Sim registration really as useful and as expedient for security as government made it known to the people? I'm sorry, I can't hear
that's
you.
my
Could you
view.
kindly go on, please? Go on. I couldn't hear you for a bit.
I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, I can.
I said, okay, the system is working. That's what we call geolocational tracking of criminals. And this has to do with their phone. Now, there's no phone call that does not transit through a mask. Now, for every signal on the phone, there is a mask closest to that device that picks that signal and sends it to the other end. So the NIN system is working because once you provide those phone numbers to the security agencies, we do tracking. And this tracking leads us to the geolocation of the criminals. And most of the criminals that have been apprehended have been successfully apprehended because this technology was deployed. What we are worried about is that the capacity to effectively drive such process is slow because we have limited capacity to engage. We don't have too many registered professionals in this field that can conduct such services for the security agencies. Their equipment also needs, because this, technology keeps changing. So not so many organizations have the equipment to do tracking. So without equipment, that's why I said capacity is the percent. If we don't have the capacity in terms of the security infrastructure that drives the use of these of NIN, for instance, we will be having delays because most tracking, registered tracking agencies or companies have tons and tons and tons of, inquiries. So by the time you are done with 10, 20, the criminal keeps moving because they know that if they are stationary, apprehending them will be so easy.
Is
I
that
think
is
to some
that in
extent
a
they
way
also have.
saying then, Mr. Onogo, my apologies, is that in a way saying that the whole idea, the whole policy isn't well thought out or thought through properly, because if we have these shortfalls that you are talking about and we're not able to use the information available to us simply because we do not have the equipment or the personnel or the capacity, then it makes nonsense of the policy and the whole exercise, don't you think?
I agree with you. The policy is a good one, but like I said, the capacity is not there. The manpower, for instance, we don't have the personnel. The equipment are not there. Most times, to get any of these things, you are talking of 100 to 200 million naira, you know, to set it up, and not so many people. So I think the government will need to look at the need to not only fund, but also to train and develop the manpower capacity to engage in this service. Having the NIN is a good development, and I must tell all Nigerians, it's like the beginning of security, because you can't secure a country in this digital world without the capacity to track what happens in the digital space. A lot of people no longer need to move around. You can send information, snap things. I remember in my childhood, to send a letter to a family, it takes like 7 days and another 7 days or more before it gets back to you. But today with my WhatsApp, I just send information and I'm chatting and talking with somebody thousands of kilometers away,
Well,
and I
Mr.
can get
Honorable,
things done.
yeah,
So
with all of the issues that you have raised so far, is it a way of saying then that the authorities are not as serious about ending insecurity as we want to believe?
well, I don't think any honest leader would want to allow insecurity to be festered on the society. So I believe they are not doing enough. They are doing something, but I think they are not doing enough. They are not giving the infrastructure, security infrastructure, what is required for them to be able to be on top of their game. So they need to do more. They need to do more.
All right, then. We have to thank you very much for being a part of our conversation this morning. Mr. Alfred Ononugbo is a forensic expert and security consultant. Thank you very much for your perspectives on this issue this morning.
It's always my pleasure.